Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to this presentation, Putting It Together, a guide to virtual ensemble projects. My name is Andrew Liu, and I teach band and choir at Hart Middle School and choir at Harvest Park Middle School in Pleasanton, California. Over the past 7 months, I've edited and advised several virtual ensemble projects. I made a lot of mistakes in the first few projects that continue to inform how I approach these projects now. And although I don't really have a magic formula for how to put these sorts of projects together, I hope that the information that I present to you today will provide you with some sort of guidance or a sort of framework to help you approach creating a virtual ensemble project in a way that's suitable for you, your students, and the resources that you have. So, virtual ensembles. We've all seen them. Some of us are a little tired of them. Virtual ensembles have become a staple of socially distanced music making. Maybe you're looking to venture into the world of virtual ensembles for the first time, but are somewhat daunted by it. Or you've already made one before, but had a rough experience making them. Or maybe you've already had a couple successful attempts and are looking for some more ideas. Regardless of what your relationship with virtual ensemble projects is, I hope you'll learn something in the upcoming presentation. Here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. 1. Practical considerations. First, we'll take a look at the general workflow of how a virtual ensemble is put together. Then we'll talk about some other options that maybe aren't as elaborate as a full virtual ensemble video. And then we'll touch upon some legal things that you have to think about when you're putting these sorts of projects together. Finally, the last section, putting it together, are a collection of tips and tricks, odds and ends, that I have found useful in making virtual ensemble projects. I'll also end with a speed-through demo of me putting together a short excerpt of a virtual ensemble project. If you would like to skip to a certain section, just go to the video timecode listed for each section. Before we can really deep dive into anything else, we need to get a basic sense of what the steps and components are to making a typical virtual ensemble video. These are the basic steps I take when I compile a video project. 1. Students are given a piece or excerpt to perform. The teacher provides a click track or an accompaniment track. 2. Students record and submit the video and audio of their performance. 3. The teacher mixes the audio in a digital audio workstation, or a DAW. 4. The teacher compiles the videos and the final mix in a video editor. Now, I'm not really going to get into the super nitty-gritty technical stuff of how exactly you use a DAW or a video editor. There are plenty of tutorials out there. Google is your friend. But I want to dive a little further into each step. Let's break down step 1. I'll talk a little bit more about repertoire choice later, but especially for your first project, I would aim to be as unambitious as possible so you and your students can get a sense of how everything works. This could mean that you're playing a piece that's relatively easy for your ensemble, or it could mean that you're just playing a very short excerpt of music. Whatever you do, it needs to be music that students can easily perform to a click track or an accompaniment track. Avoid anything with mixed meters or tempo changes. For a lot of tunes, you can just tell kids to put on a metronome at 120 beats per minute and record. But for choral tunes, I recommend using an accompaniment track so they have a reliable pitch center. There are also many ways for you to make accompaniment tracks. I like to write stuff out in Sibelius and export the audio playback. You can also get super fancy with choral tracks by recording a voice singing the part with a click track. For my 6th grade band, I've even inputted parts into Sibelius to generate a full ensemble accompaniment so they can feel like they're actually playing an ensemble, something I think the younger students appreciate. Step 2. Students record and submit video and audio of their performance. I like using Flipgrid as it's accessible to all my students. If you aren't familiar with Flipgrid, I like to think of it as the educational version of TikTok. Students turn in video-based assignments through Flipgrid, and it's accessible on most devices. We have a one-to-one Chromebook situation in our district, so I know my students can all use it, and it puts all the videos in one place for me. Ultimately, I let my students use whatever device they want. The microphones on their Chromebooks are not ideal, but your typical smartphone microphone is actually not too shabby. Students need to use headphones when they record so you get clean audio back from them. Ask them to record in as quiet of a place as possible. Sometimes recording in a car is the best way to go. Step 3. The teacher mixes audio in a digital audio workstation, or a DAW. After students submit their videos on Flipgrid, I download the videos, convert them to audio. This is easy if you have Adobe Media Encoder, which comes with Adobe Premiere. And then you put them into a DAW. Theoretically, you can just slap the videos into your video editor, line them up, set them in the grid, and call it a day, but I highly recommend working with the audio only. This allows you to have a lot of control over how the final project sounds. You know how you always tell students how the conductor's job is like being a mixing board operator? Well, now your dream has come true. You can do this in a DAW of your choice. GarageBand, Logic, and Audacity are common ones. I'm a little fancier and I use Pro Tools. You can even use Soundtrap if you wanted to. Personally, I give myself a decent amount of liberty with adjusting attacks and intonation, which I can pretty easily do in Pro Tools. In fact, I've even adjusted a horn part that was played off a third to sound correct. I think there are a lot of errors, especially with rhythm and intonation, that we are able to fix in rehearsal before a performance. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to say, make sure you match that articulation, when you can't really hear that live. As a middle school teacher, I know what my ensembles will sound like, so I really try to balance editing out things I think would be fixed in a live rehearsal and keeping errors in that provide the essence of a 6th grade band sound. Step 4. The teacher aligns the audio and video in a video editor. Once you have your final mix ready to go, all you have to do is put the videos and final mix into a video editor and then line up the videos in their boxes. For this, you can use software like Adobe Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro X. There are also several other options out there. These are just the big two. There are a lot of tutorials out there that show you a step-by-step of how to complete these in the program of your choice. From here, you can choose to do simple boxes or do more elaborate editing with transitions and alternative layouts. This spring, I edited together a video of Jungle Dance performed by my colleagues in the Pleasanton Unified School District, and most of the 40-odd hours I spent on that were from video editing. Granted, I really played around with the layouts and transitions rather than just having static boxes. And that's it. You have your finished product. If you would like to watch me complete a speed through of putting together a short virtual ensemble project, stay until the very end of the video. Now that you have a sense of the workflow, it's time to ask the question, how much work can you put in? Obviously, we don't have the time and resources to create an Eric Whitacre-style virtual choir video. He has an entire production team to put those virtual choir videos together, and I don't know about you, but I certainly don't have the budget for that. Of course, we're not trying to go for anything that elaborate with animations and tens of thousands of videos. That being said, putting together a virtual ensemble video is still pretty time-consuming. However, virtual ensemble projects don't need to be elaborate. If you're like me, the last thing you need is another project added to your workload. Let's take a look at our simpler project options. For your first few projects, you should actually consider an audio-only project instead. It's much easier to complete and lower stakes. It's far simpler to edit and delivers the essence of playing together to your students and their families. Personally, this year I know I want to complete virtual ensemble projects, but I don't think I'm really going to pursue one with a full video component. If you want to extend that a bit further, you can add some still visual components. Consider making a slideshow of program photos from previous years, create a simple still of your students in that iconic Brady Bunch layout, or have your students create illustrations based on their music. If you want to do a cross-curricular collaboration, maybe work with your visual arts teachers to have their students create drawings for the piece. If you want to incorporate a simple yet engaging video component, I would screencast your DAW as it plays and show the piece as it moves through the waveforms. Just know that once you dive into making a traditional virtual ensemble video, your workload will increase quite a lot. I think it's very much worth it, but if you have several different ensembles and pieces, it might not be practical for you. Another thing to consider is just having your students record excerpts of their music, or even better yet, perform rounds. These shorter pieces are easier for students to record, easier to edit, and if for whatever reason their recording isn't satisfactory, it doesn't feel like they've wasted a huge amount of time and can potentially re-record. When you're making these, you also have to consider what kinds of resources you have. If you don't already have suitable software, you may have to purchase those. There are lots of free options available, but then you also risk not having the support or tutorials readily available to you. Another potential resource are students and parents that you might be able to outsource video editing to. Although most people nowadays have headphones, you may have some students who you'll need to purchase headphones for. The final component of practical considerations I want to talk about is the legal stuff. Now, as a quick disclaimer, I am not a lawyer, and none of this should be taken as solid legal advice. When in doubt, ask an expert. Student video release. If you want to share a virtual ensemble project with either still photos or video, then make sure students have a media release through the school. I know in Pleasanton, students sign a photo release at the beginning of the year through their annual registration process. However, that doesn't include a video release, so we have to have parents sign another permission form. Song rights. Copyright has always been a bit of an iffy territory for music educators. I won't go into what is or isn't possible within fair use, as it's not really my expertise. I just know that fair use and fair game are not the same thing. However, if you plan on posting your virtual ensemble recordings, especially to the larger world, I do recommend that you write to the composer or publisher beforehand to get it cleared. They may request a small fee or, in some cases, let you do it for free. With these things, I generally try not to assume anything. When in doubt, ask. That's it for practical considerations. Now that we've talked about the basic logistics of how all this works, now let's talk about pedagogical approaches. Instead of going through theoreticals, I wanted to talk to you about what I've been trying to do with my students this year in actual work-in-progress examples, explain my thought processes, and talk about what has or hasn't worked. The goal I'm aiming for here is to have my 7th grade concert band put together a virtual ensemble recording of William Owens's Fortitude. The goals I have for my students here are 1. To be able to perform with a click track, 2. Understand and articulate the process of creating a virtual ensemble, and 3. Be able to produce small group ensemble recordings. I knew going into this year that if we were going to pursue creating virtual ensemble projects, that we would really need to dig into how to play with a click track. From my personal experience and talking to a lot of colleagues, I think the number one frustration for teachers when they're pursuing virtual ensemble projects is when students don't play in time. The metronome unit. In the 3rd week of school, I started all of my students on a metronome unit. In this unit, we talked about how to play with the metronome and how to assess performances with the metronome to see if the performer was ahead, behind, dragging, rushing, or right with the beat. Students then created simple Flipgrid videos of themselves clapping and counting to 4 with an audible metronome, and then submitted peer assessments for each other's performances, identifying if their peer was in time, ahead, or behind. Following the metronome unit, I continued to have my students assessed on rhythm and tempo, among other things like tone, release, etc. These were done in a mix of self-assessments in class, peer assessments in class and on Flipgrid, and of course the more formal grades from me. In class, the self-assessments were as simple as having everyone play a simple passage, muted, and then sending me a rating 1 to 4 on their rhythm. Peer assessments in class involved a student demonstrating their playing, and everyone else either rating on a Likert scale or providing written feedback through the Zoom chat. Of course, every Flipgrid video I had them complete required an audible metronome to be present, and I would provide a grade for that. The next part was to talk about the concept of a multi-track recording. I think it would be a huge missed opportunity to engage students in virtual ensemble projects without talking about the use of multi-tracks in the recording industry. People have been recording asynchronously in the industry for a really long time now. This gives us the chance to contextualize virtual ensembles by talking about music production. This also helps us think of virtual ensembles not so much as a less than adequate substitute for our live performing, but as a legitimate and very profitable medium of music creation. In fact, I personally want to continue asynchronous recording projects even once we go back to in-person learning, because I think there are really valuable skills involved. I mean, who doesn't want their students to be able to play right in time with the metronome? And I really have to give credit to my mentor, the late, great Dr. Hammer. He incorporated studio recording into the symphonic wind ensemble curriculum at University of the Pacific because he knew the great value of being able to play right in time as a professional musician. The sample product, or the rehearsal. I recently had the concert band record the last 5 measures of Fortitude using a click track. They submitted videos via Flipgrid, and then I extracted the audio and labeled them by number so they couldn't see which track belonged to which person. In class, I imported them into Soundtrap and edited them live using a screen share. During the live editing process, we listened to every single track, and I provided verbal feedback as I might for any other playing assignment. I talked about rhythm, tempo, tone, intonation, and articulation, all that stuff. As we listened to each track, I would trim and align them so that all the tracks would line up at the start. I demonstrated how it sounded if I had just aligned everything together at the start and did nothing else, and unsurprisingly, it wasn't very good. Granted, it was better than I think I expected. Take a listen. Students weren't perfectly in time, nor were they much in tune with each other. But we were able to listen to and assess each track that was submitted to and listen to them in different combinations. I did this because I wanted them to see and hear what the effect of their playing was on the editing process, observe what happens behind the scenes, and have a chance to use that knowledge and insight to improve their subsequent recordings. Otherwise, it's like if we tell each student to learn their part, and then the concert is the first time they play together. I mean, that might work for professionals, but sure doesn't work with middle schoolers. Seeing waveforms is also a big part of this. Similar to how I initially presented my metronome unit to my students visually and orally, I think it helps students a lot to see the waveforms of their audio. It not only informs how their attention to rhythm and tempo is, but it also shows very clearly the start of their notes and their articulations, their sustains, as well as the ends of their notes. The following class I did a little follow-up. I talked through a Pro Tools session I made using the recordings where I had done some heavy editing, from moving specific attacks and fixing entire rhythms to reconstructing notes that had been suppressed by the microphone and adjusting intonation. They heard a pristine recording of themselves, knowing that it wasn't an authentic product, but I wanted them to know what type of editing is possible, however impractical. Take a listen. I could have just as well not shown them any of that and told them that the heavily edited version was, in fact, what they made. But that wouldn't be truthful or helpful. To know that a pristine recording wasn't an authentic product, I think helps keep me honest in how much editing I do, and it sets a student's expectations for themselves. They know that their potential falls somewhere in between the first product and the artificial product. That's as far as I've gotten with my concert band this year. Here are my next steps for them. First, I want to have them re-record their ending excerpt in Soundtrap. This allows them to make improvements based on their previous performance of it and their experience observing the editing process. Speaking of Soundtrap, we just finally got Soundtrap for our program. I actually had a small cohort of students last year use Soundtrap, and I think it really makes a difference when it comes to creating audio-only virtual ensemble recordings. When students record in Soundtrap, they get a clean audio of their performance that they can then review with or without a metronome. This isn't possible in Flipgrid. It's very important for students to be able to listen back to their performance and hear if it was in time. I also want students to start exploring editing techniques such as punch-ins and splicing. These techniques allow students to record shorter excerpts and then splice them together as they go. For example, they would record 4 bars plus a downbeat of the next bar, and then they would start on that next bar recording on the downbeat that they stopped at, and then splice those 2 excerpts together. There are also some solo and small group virtual ensemble projects. Rounds are a great solo or small group project for any ensemble type. You can have them record and then even remix their round by adding drum beats or whatever wild loops that they want to add to it. Duets and chorales are also great options. We have a lot of duets in our method books. And also last year I started students on 36 chorales for band by Aaron Cole. These are freely available online. They're 4-part SATB chorales, and every instrument has all 4 parts visible and in their playing range, so they can play all 4 parts. And then of course, full group virtual ensemble projects, where students can all work together on one soundtrack project to put together a full piece. My concert band has gotten the furthest by far of any of my groups in terms of virtual ensembles. However, I still want to talk about my choirs and the approach I'm taking with them. I have 3 choirs across the 2 schools I teach at, and due to a variety of circumstances, all of them are mixed voices, mixed grades, and mixed skill levels. So to keep things a little simpler for myself, I've given all 3 of my choirs the same curriculum. Just like the concert band, I started them off with a metronome unit before moving on to solfege and singing. Instead of choosing a formal piece, I've chosen 3 things for my students to focus on this semester. The first is a round. I had my students learn a round called Ding Dong, and although most of my students know what a round is and how it works, I have several students new to music that don't. And boy, is it hard to teach a round without being able to have the whole class to work on it in person. What I did was record myself singing the round into Soundtrap, making my singing into a loop, and then creating different repeating layers with offset entrances. Take a listen, although just know that I recorded this really late at night. Ding dong, hear the morning church bell play, hear them sound at break of day, 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 hear them sound at break of day. Hear them sound at break of day. Good day, good day. At this point, my students didn't yet have access to Soundtrap, but they were surprisingly very excited at the prospect of using it. It wasn't until after I created this remix, however, that my students were constantly asking me when our district would finally approve Soundtrap and let us use it. Ding dong, hear the morning church bell play, hear them sound at break of day. Good day, good day. Ding dong, hear the morning church bell play, hear them sound at break of day, hear them sound at break of day, hear them sound at break of day. 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 Ding, ding, hear the morning church bell play. Now that we have Soundtrap, my students will begin creating their own recordings and remixes soon. The other 2 songs I'm having my students work on are the gospel song This Train and the spiritual When the Saints Go Marching In. I chose these tunes because they both have very simple and recognizable melodies. They're simple in structure, and most importantly, they work as partner songs. This is kind of a step above creating rounds. With partner songs, students can record two different melodies and then put them together in harmony. In this final section, I just want to briefly mention a few odds and ends, tips and tricks for when you and your students are putting together your projects, and then end with a speed-through demonstration of me putting together an excerpt from Fortitude as performed by my concert band. Check your levels! There's nothing worse than recording a solid take only to realize that you've blasted out the microphone on your Chromebook. Make sure students check their levels first. Brass instruments should consider pointing off to the side of the microphone a bit, or even stand back. On a similar note, I know that many devices will do some automatic levels, which may affect recording quality and dynamics. Headphones. The initial tendency for most students when recording is to have both ears covered. I recommend that you tell your students to uncover one ear so that they can hear themselves properly. It can really make a world of difference in both tone and rhythmic accuracy. That being said, I think it's something that they should practice before they record so they can get a feel of how everything sounds. Don't forget to freeze! I have a lot of students who rush to end their recording right after they play. Not only is this kind of visually abrupt, it can really mess up the sound of the recording at the end. Panning. After you've done all your editing and mixing of levels, your recording may still sound muddy and mushy. That's when it's time to play with panning. By default, all the tracks are being split evenly between your left and right ears, especially if you're wearing headphones. Of course, this isn't how we hear ensembles playing in real life. We hear it in 3 dimensions. Play around with where sections are placed in the ensemble using panning. Once you start shifting them around, you'll hear a pretty significant difference in clarity and fullness. Here's a quick demo of the difference it makes. First, a clip that is mono with no panning, and then a clip that is stereo with lots of panning. Play with the border. When you're editing your video tiles, leave some space in between each video to create a border. Play around with the border color, as it can really change the vibe of your entire performance, similar to how stage lighting affects musical performances. Lighten the computer load. As you're editing the video and adding more and more videos into the mix, you may find your computer starting to really struggle with processing, especially if you have a lot of videos. It'll probably start to get super slow and gets really, really frustrating. A couple ideas to combat this are to find a way to lower the preview resolution. On a similar note, if you feel like you have way too many videos to comfortably fit on the screen, consider splitting them up into 2 or 3 pages of videos. A great example of this would be the Cobb County Virtual Band's performance of Tyler Grant's Shimmering Joy. This way, the computer is only processing a handful of videos at once. And that's all I have for you today. I know this was a lot of information to digest, so if there are 3 things for you to take away from this, it's 1, give yourself license to simplify. You don't have to do a full-on elaborate video. Maybe consider just audio only instead. Do what works for your workload and your program. 2, have your students practice recording skills. And 3, frame virtual ensembles as a unique and legitimate form of music creation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact me via email at alu@pleasantonusd.net. Similarly, I'd love to hear from you if you have any other ideas revolving around virtual ensembles. This is something that I'm by no means an expert at. We're all thrown into this at the same time. I'd like to thank Greg Miller and CMEA Bay Section for asking me to put together this presentation, and to all of you for watching. If you would like to see a video of me completing an entire speed through of a virtual ensemble project, then go ahead and watch to the end. Otherwise, stay safe stay healthy, and stay musical. Bye! Hey everyone, I'm here in my classroom in Pleasanton, and I'm going to show you how I go from start to finish on one of these virtual ensemble projects. I have everything here set up, and so let's dive right in. I have already downloaded all the video files from Flipgrid. I have 20 files here because that's how many students have already turned in their assignment. And I have Adobe Media Encoder opened. And what Adobe Media Encoder will help us do is convert the video files into audio files. This comes free with Adobe Premiere Pro if you have that. Otherwise, you might have to find some other ways to convert video to audio. So all I have to do here is select all of my video files, drag them in, and you can see automatically that it is it'll be set to convert to waveform audio or just a WAV file. And now all I have to do is press this play button here, and it will start to convert all of those videos into audio. And you can see on the side here, it's just putting them right in the same folder. All right, all our video files have been converted to audio files here. I'm going to go ahead and open up Pro Tools and get that all set ready to go. And that should be done now. All right, so here is my Pro Tools session open and ready to go. All I have to do is take these audio files, drag and drop, and let it kind of do its thing. All right, so we have all the audio files imported into the Pro Tools session. The first step I'm going to do is I'm going to take away any files or any tracks that I know immediately won't work for this. So here I can see this file here. Most likely the student left their metronome on because I can see these even ticks. And let's actually just take a listen to that. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that file because I don't want to try messing with any of that. Oops. Hello. There we go. All right, the next step I'm going to take is I'm going to listen to each of these and kind of just line up the first note for all of these. So I'm going to kind of just speed through this process, and you can just kind of watch the time lapse here. So I have all the tracks set to start at the same time. I know in the score everyone plays on the downbeat here. And I just did all of this visually. So I haven't cross-checked it by listening to it. I know it's not going to be perfect, but this is what it sounds like right now. Oh. All right, so looks like one of our percussionists, I guess, maybe misread their music and has kind of gone on into oblivion here. So this is one of those tracks, just like the one before with the metronome, that I would delete. And I should also note, these when I delete these tracks, they're also the ones I'm going to go back to the student and say, hey, your track was not satisfactory. I need you to do this again, and kind of talk through why and what kind of mistakes they need to fix. So we're just going to delete that for now. And, you know, theoretically, I could like splice it all together, you know, kind of move notes around, which I'll show you later. But one, that's not really an authentic product. And two, dealing with the video component there later will be kind of iffy. Now, before I go into some deep editing, I'm going to make sure that the Pro Tools session tempo is set correctly. So it's currently set to 120. I had my students record at 100. So I just want to make sure that that's all set. And I can actually see where the bar lines are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have all of these start on the second measure here. Oops. There we go. And now I can see how all of the beats actually line up. So if we look at this, these first three tracks here, we can see quite a bit of rhythmic discrepancy. Like these notes come in super, super early. And if we listen to them right now, just the first three tracks together, it sounds like this. Okay, so I can tell right here that it's pretty together, although this person has a pretty early fourth note. So I can actually start to shift these around. And I can see that they're a little earlier here too. So I'm going to just select all of this, and I can actually bump all these back. Now, again, we go into the debate here of whether or not it's an authentic product. I don't think this is, but for the sake of demonstration, I wanted to show you what is possible and what isn't possible. And you can make those decisions for yourself, accordingly. So these aren't perfect, but let's just listen to that again. Okay, so starting at the places where I stopped editing it, it starts to sound a little choppy, so I'm just going to make those adjustments again. Those last notes look pretty in time. These look a little early. So I'm going to shift those out a little as well. All right, so that sounds all right. It's not perfect. Again, I'm not going to like really get super nitpicky for the sake of time. But I'm just going to go through here now and edit through the rest of them. All right, so here I found something really interesting. I have a clarinet note here that has been kind of muted by either the computer's like automatic noise suppression algorithm or maybe use Flipgrid, I'm not too sure. But if we listen to this note here, which we can see kind of suddenly dips down. So knowing that this was not the student's fault, I'm going to actually reconstruct this note. So luckily this note has given us enough kind of body to work with. And what I can do is kind of just copy paste these through. Oops. So it sustains through like so. And then I can add these tapers and crossfades so it makes all these nice and smooth. And again, it won't sound perfect, and I know that there are apps and plugins that can actually help you with this, but this is just the easiest way for me right now. Okay, it sounds a little wavy, but if I just kind of adjust these a little, I can make it sound pretty reasonable. I'm not really gonna get too crazy with that right now. But in the grand scheme of all the audio, it'll sound a little fuller maybe. All right, moving on. All right, so now I have most of the notes kind of lined up as I need them. Let's take a listen to how this sounds right now. Not too bad. The rhythms are aligned so it doesn't sound too mushy, but we still have a lot of intonation issues. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and adjust some intonation a bit, and I can actually use this Pitch Shift 2 tool from Pro Tools. While I do this, I'm also going to go through each track and rename them the instrument track so that I can compare instruments and kind of sort them all out. All right, so I have all the intonations set into kind of a ballpark. It's not perfect. I could adjust every note if I wanted to. I'm not going to. But this is just kind of a demo of what is possible. So let's just take a listen. That's not too bad. It's not perfect again. The next step for me is to pan the audio so that we have all the audio in kind of a 3D spatial environment as we would actually hear this in real life. We don't hear all the instruments equally in both ears when we listen to an ensemble. But before I do that, I'm just going to kind of align all of these tracks so that they are all paired together or grouped together properly. All right, and now I can bring up my mixing window and I can see all of these little panning dials. So right now all of them are set. The left side audio is all the way to the left and the right side audio is all the way to the right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have the flutes all kind of on the left side-ish, the clarinets on the right side-ish, and kind of brass in the middle-ish, and kind of spread things around. So let's go through that right now. All right, let's take a listen to this. All right, I kind of like how that sounds. So now I'm going to go ahead and export this audio. So I'm just going to bounce to disk here. All right, and now I'm going to start editing the video component. Ready, and now. All right, I have Adobe Premiere Pro open, and I'm going to import all my files. So here are my video files and the final mix. I'm just going to put that in. All right, and we're just going to start creating our sequence. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the audio file. This is the master audio file. Right there. Okay, cool. So I'm going to lock that so it doesn't move. and we're going to just start syncing in the videos one by one. So I'm going to use the waveforms to kind of match up where the video is. And mute that. And again, I'm not going to go for perfection. I don't need every finger to be pressing down at the exact correct time because, you know, we also adjusted some of our attacks earlier. So what I'm going to do is once a video is lined up with audio, I'm going to just delete the audio and kind of start on the next one. Alright, so now I have all of my videos lined up together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start shrinking each of the videos down into their smaller boxes, because right now each of the videos are overlapping full screen, and then I can just start clicking and dragging them around. I have a total of 19 videos here, which is a little tough because it's an odd number. In fact, it's a prime number. So making a grid is going to be a little funky. I think I'm going to go for a 4x5 grid, and then maybe just have a spare corner or something, or an empty middle for like a logo or whatever. All right, so here we go. All right, so we have all the students nicely fit in a grid. It's not perfect. If I really wanted to, I would actually like do all the calculations for what pixels and what point each video needs to be set in on the grid. But this, I just kind of eyeballed it, and you can see there's a bit of kind of leftover space. Here I can maybe put like I can either space out the videos and take time to, really make sure they're all spaced out, or, I can put a banner at the bottom or something, maybe the title of the song. In this empty little box here, I could, in the corner, I could also put like a logo or whatever. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to make all of these just a hair smaller. So I'm going to say like 18%. And then it's going to create like a little border for me. So let's see. All right, so now that I have the scale down, I can actually see there's a bit of a border on each one. And what I can do now is, because I don't really want a black border, I think it looks a little just kind of bleak. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a white background to all of this. So let's see, new color map. All right, and I think that already just looks a lot brighter and happier, not so bleak. Now I'm going to trim the beginnings of the video so that all the videos start at the same time. All right, I let the computer do some kind of rendering and stuff to get itself set. Now let's take a look at the finished product. All right, not bad. I'm pretty happy with that. You'll notice that one of the things I did was I didn't trim the ends of the videos to all end at the same time. Instead, I let the videos kind of end as the students turned off the recording, and I think it adds a nice little effect to it. Again, that's all there is to this. I can now just export this, maybe upload it onto YouTube or Google Drive or whatever, and share it with the students and their families. Well, I hope this was helpful for you and informative. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.